see you.
Okay, so again, good to be with everybody. Hope you had a nice weekend. God, yesterday was like the perfect fall day. I had my grandson's last football game yesterday.
Testing.
So it was beautiful. Please remember to chat in if you've got questions, comments, observations. Those are always helpful for all of us. We all learn more when we're sharing together. So today we're going to talk about, let's see here, got ahead of myself. We're going to talk about the Hermetic Principles, and you know, it's a kind of a little bit of a history lesson, and then we can get into them, and they're super fascinating. And they come out of the mystery schools, which I'll explain in a minute. But anyway, so the Hermetic Principles, there's 7 of them, and they come from a combination of Greek and Egyptian philosophy, and so the Egyptians are the older of the 2 cultures, right? But the Egyptians and the Greeks interacted quite a bit and shared a lot of their information, their philosophical beliefs, and it kind of became this syncretic combination. And syncretic, if you're not familiar with the term, is kind of a combination of beliefs, syncretic beliefs, right? Or tend to be beliefs of multiple cultures, right? And so and of course, over time, the Romans dominated, of course, Greece and later Egypt, but the Greeks and the Egyptians were kind of more of the philosophers and the administrators, where the Romans were kind of more of the muscle, so to speak. And so the Greeks and the Egyptians, they had they had their gods, and so for the Egyptians, it was Thoth, right? And that was their god. And the Greek, and for the Greek gods, it was Hermes, and Thoth and Hermes were kind of the 2 main philosophical gods for those 2 cultures, and so there wasn't necessarily a person named Hermes. It was really a combination of these 2 beliefs, and then scholars and philosophers kind of wrote around them. So in any event, so it's kind of a combination of both Greek and Egyptian, which I think is totally fascinating. The Egyptians always looked at the Greeks as kind of the novices because they hadn't been around as long, and the Greeks kind of look at the Egyptians as kind of the older group, right? And so they put these 2 together, and it became and they get referred to as the Hermetic Principles. And so a lot of the Hermetic Principles were passed down through what they called mystery schools. And so a long time ago, right, so these are thousands of years old, these Hermetic Principles. And they've been around for a long time, but they were not really given to the common folk, so to speak, right? And it really wasn't until where it was more broadly distributed through when books and printing became available. Of course, when books and printing, you had to be of some wealth and means, 1,000 years ago, 700 years ago, to be able to read or even own a book, right? So they were kind of passed down through the mystery schools, and the mystery schools are kind of just that. When you take a look at the philosophers, most of them taught in mystery schools, and so you had to be somebody of typically wealth or of an importance to get into a mystery school and then kind of learn these principles. Of course, now we have the internet, and they're pervasive. And they're not that hard. They're not that hard to find, of course, right? You can just go Google them. But years ago, it was sacred knowledge about these Hermetic principles, and quite literally, you can, as we would say today, is you could tell time by them. They're so profound and they're so accurate. And for me, by example, I use them all the time, in almost everything I do in some way, shape, or form. But the mystery schools, that's how they were passed down through lineages, and how they were taught. And there's still mystery schools today. There's 7 in the world. Some are open to membership if you want. Some are closed, so it's by invitation only. And they're places where you go study, the ancient mysteries, the ancient traditions, and where you kind of preserve them still and pass them along. So it's really a place where you can study, the ancient customs, the ancient knowledge, that really kind of ruled life of the day, many years ago, sometimes, thousands of years ago. So pretty fascinating stuff. So let's get into the Hermetic principles. So there's 7 of them, and there are, you can see there's kind of glyphs that go with each one of them. And so we'll start with the principle of mentalism. Now, just like full disclosure, right? I'm a complete and total novice at this. I can explain them. I take classes, and I maintain, a fairly steady study of these things, but I'm in no way, shape, or form an expert. I can just provide you with kind of a voiceover, and they're worth getting into on your own. You certainly audiobooks and YouTube videos and things like that. You can help educate yourself. So the principle of mentalism, all is the mind, the universe is mental. So, what they're talking about here is that how we think and what we believe in is what we're going to get. Okay. And so the universe is open to us based on our thought process. And so, it's a little bit, if we were to convert it to today's thinking, it's about manifestation. It's about, if you think you can, you can. If you think you can't, you can't. I had a high school football coach, in probably less than eloquent terms and what Hermetic philosophers would refer to it. He would always tell us as a team, free your mind and your ass will follow. So, not particularly eloquent, but I think it gets to the point, right? So the all is mind, the universe is mental. So whatever you're thinking is whatever you're going to attract, basically. Next is correspondence, the principle of correspondence. As above, so below, as below, so above. And you might have heard this before because it's fairly common, but as above, so below, as above, as below, so above. And really what that refers to is the macrocosm and the microcosm, or the microcosm and the macrocosm, right? So microcosm, being kind of us, right? We're kind of the microcosm, and the macrocosm is the universe. And so whatever happens to us is a reflection in the universe, and whatever happens in the universe and the stars is a reflection on us. And it's, in other words, it's all connected. And if you don't follow any astrology is kind of a fun thing to follow. I did this. I used to do this thing where I would read my horoscope the day after. And it was fun because then I would be able, not the day of or the day before, but the day after, because then I could actually compare it to actually what happened. And they're kind of remarkably accurate, right? And sometimes it requires a little bit of, deciphering, to find the accuracy of it. But correspondence. So, whatever happens in the small world happens in the big world, basically, is a pretty good way to look at it. Vibration. This is one of my favorites. So the principle of vibration: nothing rests, everything moves, everything vibrates. So, for us, how we would interpret that is the law of vibration is everything is in a constant state of change, everything. And I think, the period of time we're in right now, that we are in a hyper state of change. But when they talk about that everything vibrates, okay, so for instance, like the building I'm in now, at some level, and um, probably a level that obviously it would take technology to measure. This building is vibrating into a state of decay, a state of change. Okay, this building might be here for 1,000 years, but nevertheless, it's still vibrating into a state of change. And so that's what really that talks to. Everything is always in a state of change. Nothing's ever resting, whether it's the material world around us, our relationships, our physical bodies, our minds, our viewpoints on things, all that. Everything is in a constant state of vibration. Nothing rests. Everything's always moving. Okay, it's especially right now. I think that's a really good a good principle to be aware of. It's actually one of my favorites. The principle of polarity. Everything is dual, everything has poles, everything has a pair of opposites. Like and unlike are the same. Opposites are identical in their nature. And I'll explain it this way, okay? That with polarity, like at a personal level, okay, like our strengths are also our weaknesses, okay? So, and I'll just use myself for a minute. I'm kind of a high creative. That's a real strength of mine. Okay. How does that correspond into a weakness? I get bored easy. Okay. I'm not great on detail. I'll do it, but I'm not great at it. I don't like it. Okay. And for me, because I'm a high creative, I'm constantly wanting to create things. Okay. As opposed to rely on systems. So what do I have to do? Well, I have to surround myself with people who are really good at systems, because I'm not the guy. And now I'm good at creating, but then how do you take creation and then convert it to a system, right? Because creating things in of itself, yeah, so what, right? You have to create it and then create it in a way that it can be replicated. So for all of us, polarity is about strengths and weaknesses, and they're kind of the same. Like, we have to understand the fact that if we're good over here, that's great. Okay. However, over here, okay, there's something that we have to pay attention to. All right. And we need both that light and that dark. See, because you can't have light without dark, or dark without light. You have to have them together, right? And it's the same thing with our strengths and weaknesses. So if you look at it as light and dark, because you have to have both, right? Because you can't get the perspective of light without dark, and vice versa. And our strengths are always our weaknesses. So that's when you think about things that are polarizing, and how polarity works. And think about yourself for a minute. Like, what are you good at? And or what are you not good at? Right. And you can take a look at it, you can say, well, I'm really not that good at this, but because I'm not that good at this, it makes me better over here. Right. And it takes a little bit of thinking, and you have to really kind of walk with it a little bit, but it's a fun thing to do, because you understand yourself better. Right. So that's the principle of polarity. The principle of gender. Gender isn't everything. Everything has its masculine and feminine principles. And when you take a look at the glyph for gender, looks very similar to the yin yang that you find in Asian studies. And so we all have that masculine and feminine elements to us, and you need that, right? You need that for both. You think about unions, and marriage and relationships, and the softer things in life and the harder things in life, right? But you need all of that, right? You need the balance, and we all have that in us. We all have parts of us that are more masculine and parts of us that are more feminine, or vice versa. But you need both to have balance, and that's really what the yin yang is talks about. Is really more about balance, right? That you need to have both. Rhythm, the principle of rhythm. Everything flows in and out. Everything has its tides. all things rise and fall. The pendulum swing, the pendulum swing manifests in everything. The measure of swing to the right is the measure of swing to the left. And you think about rhythm for a minute. Um, I'm gonna make this assumption that this glyph, you take those, looks a lot to me like those, oh, those hanging spheres, and when you take one and it bounces back and forth, right? There's 3 or 4 of them in a row. I forgot how that goes. But everything has a rhythm to it, and we sense that when we're doing certain things, right? Today we would call it being in the flow, right? We're not crazy over here, we're not crazy over there. We're kind of in the flow. And a lot of times events, right, will start out where you know again, to use a more common term, we would look at it as the whipsaw effect, right? Well, something goes on and we overcompensate over here, and then we overcompensate over here, and because we overcompensated here, then we go back over here, and then we settle into the middle, and that's how you find your rhythm. And I think the whole concept of whatever goes up comes down. Well, that's true. um, and and how do we find our rhythm around things, in our relationships, could be in our health, could be in something we like, could be in any one thing, a rhythm around our thinking, right? That how do we find that kind of sweet spot in how we think or look at something. That's a type of rhythm. And so think about things that you're doing, whether it's work or hobbies or whatever it is, and understand that everything kind of flows in and out. If you take 2 guitars, right, and you with resonance, and you put one in one corner and one in the other, and you pluck the strings, the other one that you didn't pluck will eventually fall into resonance, right? So everything's about rhythm and flow. That's the principle of rhythm. And then the principle of cause and effect, um, is that everything, for every cause, there's an effect. And I think it kind of goes back to what we were talking about a couple of weeks ago about unintended consequences, right? When it's like squeezing on a balloon. When you squeeze on a balloon, something's going to happen, right? Something's going to pop out someplace else. So anytime that um, there's a cause, it's going to have an effect, and it's going to change things. And everything happens in accordance to the law of cause and effect. And so, you know, um, things don't happen randomly; they happen intentionally. And so when there is a cause, right, when something changes here, it's naturally going to create another outcome in another place, right? And none of it in cause and effect is random. I know a lot of times that we look at it and we'll say, like, I'll do something here, and then something changes over there, or something pops up that like we didn't anticipate. Well, it was supposed to pop up because it's supposed to help give us a different perspective. That's not just chance that it happened. Okay. So anytime we change something in our world, it creates outcomes in other places. But those outcomes, just like we were talking about in unintended consequences, those outcomes are very deliberate, and they're deliberate to get our attention to pay attention to something else, right? So every cause has an effect, and it's all very deliberate. None of it's by chance. So let's see how we're doing here for chats. Was my sound off today? So was my sound okay? Oh, just in the beginning. Okay. All right, great. Thanks. Yeah, so that's the those are the Hermetic principles or Hermetic laws. They're super fascinating. Anybody's got any other chats? I'll leave the chat open. Yeah, they're super fascinating, and quite literally, you can tell time by them. And if it's not really about studying them or memorizing them, but becoming acquainted with them, like understanding that, for instance, I love the law of vibration. Everything is vibrating all the time. Everything's in a state of change. Everything. Even the things that you think are the most solid are still in a state of change. And certainly law of correspondence, I think is helpful, especially in that we understand that everything we do at a macrocosm, or a microcosm at our level has an effect in the greater world around us, and the greater world around us has an effect on us as individuals. So, all right, looks like we're good with chat. So, how do you guys like that? Is that interesting? It's kind of a departure from things that we usually talk about, but it seems kind of relevant today, especially with the state of change that we're in, and the speed of change and all that. So I hope that was helpful, and we will be back at it with a new topic on next Monday. So take care. Have an amazing week.